Hello and welcome to another coding session. How about that? How about that? Bet you didn't expect that shit to happen yet again. So today is Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. That means today, according to the schedule, we're doing a game development in C++. You can find the source code of the game in here if you're interested. It's going to be in the description and I'm going to post it in the chat for lovely people out there. Hello Cerimon, hi. Hello Livithanos, One, Libra, welcome. How are you guys doing? So yeah, today we're just doing game development. So let's take a look at the game. Let's take a look at the game itself. I'm going to fetch the latest stuff. And then I'm gonna merge the origin master. So I also have some previous branches that I want to probably remove. And let's rebuild the entire game. Just gonna take a little bit of time, but not too long. Alright, so if I run this game, so this is how the game looks like. It's not a final look and feel, it's just like a technological prototype. And on the previous session, we actually developed this kind of tooltips, right? So we have an editor in which I can edit things, and I can also spawn enemies, right? I can also spawn enemies, and I can also spawn items. And as you can see, this UI is actually, has a little bit of UX. It explains what each individual button does. And that's pretty cool, that's pretty convenient, but there's one thing that that is missing in our game in terms of like development tools, and that is the development console, the one that that actually slides down when you press tilde or something like that, like similar to the Quake one. So the previous version of this game had that console. This version doesn't have that console yet, and today I wanted to actually focus on implementing that development console for that game. So that's precisely what we're going to be doing today. Isn't that exciting? Is that cool? I think it's pretty goddamn cool. Dev console. All right, so let's get started, I suppose. Let's get started. Hello, IndieCost. All right, so I don't remember if I have an issue for that, so I'm gonna just go ahead and create the separate branch called development console. So let me see, I suppose we need some sort of a variable that indicates that the development console actually slides down, right? So we have a boolean that indicates that we are in editor mode, right? So, and it renders the UI, so we need something similar for the console, right? So basically indicates whether, how do you spell, whether the console is enabled, right? So this is going to be something like that. So by default it's going to be false, but if it is enabled, it's going to be enabled. All right. It's kind of interesting. So how technically we're going to actually do that? Because we also need to have like a UI here, right? So we're gonna be having UI in here that you can interact with, and also if there's gonna be a console, and what if the console actually like overlaps the UI? I'm not really sure how we're gonna precisely solve that. We'll see. So let me see what we can do in here. So I'm gonna go to the game CPP. Right, so this is going to be something like a render. Where's the... Oh, yeah, I remember we don't have a render anymore. We have only like one update thing in here. So here we're rendering all of these things, and here we're rendering the editor. If the editor is enabled, right, so then we have a debug label. And I'm thinking that I'm going to simply just do something like if console is enabled, we're going to be rendering the console. Right, and the question is how we're going to be rendering the console. So first thing we can try to do, we can try to simply render like a black box at the top, right, just to indicate the console or something like that. So let's draw the screen. This is how our screen looks like. So at the center of the screen we have 0, 0. So, and the coordinate system goes like this, right? So this is going to be X, and this is going to be Y. So, and essentially we're going to have some sort of like a console width, right? And we need to construct a rectangle like this, right? So the rectangle starts at here, so that means we need to identify this point, right, somewhere here, which is basically minus half of the width minus half of the height, and basically subtract the width of the console. So, and that's going to be our console, I suppose. So let's see if we can do that. So this is how I'm going to be denoting all of that. So I have a config file, right? In the config file, I think I'm going to be adding the constants for the console. So this is going to be console height, right? And there will be no console width because it takes the whole width of the screen. So it's going to be float, and I'm going to set it to 100 since it's going to be the runtime value. We can actually tweak it at runtime, so no big deal, no biggie at all. So, all right. So I need to take the position. Oh yeah, here's the screen size, I think. So here's the screen size. There we go. And we need to cast it to float, right? So we take in screen width and screen height, and we are turning it into a vector, and then we cast each individual thing in here to a float. After that, I want to divide it by 2. I can simply multiply it by half, and there we go. I have essentially half of the width and half of the height. And I can multiply it by a negative value, and that's going to be precisely the point that is located in here. So this is actually, no, not really, it's a minus width but plus height. That's quite important. It's a minus width but plus height. So maybe because of that, I'm going to actually doing something like this. I'm going to multiply it by vector 2 minus width, right? Minus width but plus height. There we go. So that's the point where we start all of that. So I can basically put it into some sort of like a variable. Left top corner. So this is left top corner. This is where it's located. And then I can do something like const outer console position, and console position is essentially left top corner minus vector 2. And as I already said, we're not touching the width. Width is going to be 0, but height is going to be essentially console height. And this is how we're going to position this entire thing. There we go. We have console position and stuff like that. So then we need to construct a console rectangle, right? So console rectangle consists of the AABB console position. There we go. So here is the console position. And in terms of the size, right, the size of the console is going to be the screen width, right? So this is the screen width and the console height that we provided in here. There we go. So we have a rectangle. Once we have a rectangle, we can try to fill that rectangle, you know, with a particular color. So let's actually find the renderer. Fill AABB. So we have this thing. Right? So this is going to be a renderer. Yep. So then we're going to use console. Console rect. There we go. So on top of that, we probably need to know the color of the console. I suppose I'm going to actually introduce another constant in here. It's going to be console color. Maybe, yeah, console background. Let's call it console background because you're also going to have a foreground. Right, you're also going to have a foreground. In terms of UV coordinates for the texture, I think we need to ask the atlas for the solid color. So it's going to be get UV for the texture 0. And the program that we're going to use program is the shader program. We're going to use the screen program. Basically, whatever you're rendering on the screen. And there we go. So we managed to fill the rectangle on the screen. Hopefully. Let's try to compile this entire stuff and see if it is compilable. So we don't have a console background defined. Class template argument deduction, it couldn't deduce because, okay, so this thing has to be statically cast to float, right? So we need to statically cast this entire thing to float before we can actually use it in there, right? So, and the only problem we have in here is that we don't have a console background, so let's go to the configuration file and introduce the color. So what's going to be the background of the console? I suppose it's going to be black for now. Right, so maybe it's going to have a little bit of translucency, and because of that we can adjust the alpha, but not for now. Alright, so everything seems to be compiling, but we unfortunately have no way to disable the console, right? So if I try to run the game now, right, we won't be able to see the console at all. So the thing we need to do, we need to bind some sort of a key to enable the console, right? So where do we handle the events? Something like event, mouse button, key down. Okay, so let's actually assign something like C, right? So it's going to be SDLK C, and in here essentially we're just doing console, not equal not console, and that way we're basically toggling between enabled and disabled. And I need to recompile the entire stuff. Okay, so alright, so here's the debug mode, and now I'm gonna try to enable the console. And it kind of worked, but it's actually very small on top of, it is very small. And the cursor is actually behind the console, so maybe this is something that I want to fix. Where do we render the cursor? So it's probably, yeah, here's the cursor, and I think cursor is actually rendered when the editor is enabled, which is rather strange, and I'm not even sure. When should we render the cursor? I guess we could render the cursor when either console or editor are enabled. You know what I'm talking about? Alright, so here's the debug label, and here's the cursor, and it is enabled only if editor or console are enabled, right? So if any of those things are enabled, we're gonna be rendering the cursor. Okay, so I wish it actually recompiled a little bit faster, but it is what it is. Okay, so here's that, and also, okay, that makes sense, and now the cursor is also over the console, right? So yeah, I can enable the debug mode and this thing like sort of separately. Interestingly, I still can shoot like this. Huh, that's very interesting. Okay, alright, so let's actually go to the configuration file and adjust the look and feel of the console, right? So one of the things we can adjust in here is the size of the console, so let's actually make it a little bit bigger, maybe 500, so yeah, I think maybe even 600 is gonna be better, and let's make it slightly translucent, maybe DD, yeah, something like, maybe EE would be, yeah, something like EE is a little bit better. So this is how the console is gonna look like. Maybe it could be even bigger than that, 7. Right, so I think about this size it's okay, right? So, and I can disable it as well, right? So, and here I have this kind of stuff. Alright, so looks good, looks good. So we have our like background for the console, right? So yeah. Hello everyone, hello Duke, hello Hudson Plots, Zero Gaming, hello, hello, how are you guys doing? So maybe the console height is not going to be determined by the by specific pixels, but rather by the amount of rows and columns that you can have in there. Alright, because we're going to be rendering the text inside of the console, so all of that could be like dynamic, right? Yeah, we'll see how it goes. How much do you use templates and operators overloading in your project? I haven't measured, but you can try to do that yourself. You can download a utility called grep and then do -r, which means grep is going to go into recursive mode and search for things like operator, right? Things like operator, and then search for things like template, and then count the amount of times I use template and operators, and then divide that value by the amount of lines I have in the project, and you get percentage of how often I use all of that. And you can do that totally yourself. The source code is completely open, so feel free to do that. So. Okay, so let's do the following thing. Introduce the console. I suppose the ability to enable, disable the console. To enable, disable the console. So I'm gonna push that right into the repo. So, and what we want to render in that console, to be fair. As I already said, I don't think I want to talk about the console in terms of like, talk about the height of the console in terms of the pixels. I want to talk about it in terms of the rows. Maybe because of that, I'm going to say console rows, right? And this is going to be integer, right? And let's say that we're going to have 60 rows. But here's an interesting thing. So the actual height is going to depend on the scale for the font. So we'll have to introduce something like console scale, I suppose, right? So it's going to be float and it's going to be something like 1. So we don't need any of these things in here. So let's try to recompile this entire thing and see how it goes. All right, so console height. Okay, so let's do something like this. This is going to be const outer console height, right? So this is the console height, and as already said, yeah, we need to know the height of the font. Do we even have that information anywhere? So I think somewhere in the font, yeah. So this is the rows and columns, but we don't really, I guess we can just use the like text size, right? So if we know the font, we can do text size, and we can provide like a single character. What's the size of the single character? And then I say console scale, right? So this will give me console scale. And the only thing I care about this specific size is its height, which is going to be y, and I'm going to multiply it by the console rows. And that way I have the console height in pixels calculated from the console height in rows. So that's actually pretty good. Okay. So this one was not declared in the scope. Yeah, so I'll have to do something like this. All right, so, and if I enable this thing, it's working, right? And now I can try to do something like this. So what if I'm gonna have one more row? Okay, so as you can see, it's increasing, but not really that much. So I can increase the, yeah, so if you increase the scale, it becomes instantly like huge. Insanely huge. So we're gonna keep the scale like around 1.5. But it's kind of difficult to tell how the text is gonna look like because there's no text. So maybe it would make sense to introduce some sort of like a dummy text in here, if you know what I mean. Right, so let's actually try to render something there. So if we have a console enabled, so this is the background essentially, right? So I'm gonna put it like this. background, and then we're going to have foreground. Right, we have foreground. So, and I'm gonna just, like for each individual row, I'm gonna just render some sort of a text, right? For size t0 less than console rows plus I, and I'm gonna just render text in there. So I need to first calculate where exactly I want to calculate the text, right? Where is my, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. All right. So I know the height of each individual row, and I know specific row. So, and also I need to keep in mind that we're actually rendering from here because the Y is growing up. So, yeah, should be all right. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So it's going to be const outer row position. A row position is essentially console position plus vector 2. In terms of x, it's going to be always 0, but in terms of y, it is going to be I multiplied by the console, I suppose, console scale. I need this value somewhere in here. Yes, I need this value somewhere in here. So const outer console row height. Yeah. So I need to extract this entire thing into a separate variable. Console row height. There we go. Console row height, and I need to multiply it like that. Console row, a single row height. A single row height. So here is the row position. And so now I'm gonna go to the renderer, right? And I'm gonna try it. It's actually not renderer, it's actually font, right? So, and we're gonna try to render some sort of a text. Some sort of the text. All right. It's gonna be font. And the text is gonna be, I don't know, like something, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, just to see something in there. The position is gonna be a row position, the scale is gonna be console scale, right? And the color, by the way, has to be console foreground, because we're currently rendering foreground. Right, foreground, there we go. So vars config. So in the foreground, I think in this particular case, I'm gonna just replace this thing with f's, right? So the background is gonna be black and the foreground is gonna be white, and nothing particularly fancy. All right, so okay, console background is already, yeah, this one has to be foreground, yeah, because it's already defined. Okay, so console rows, okay, this one is integer, so we don't have a size t one. Maybe we should introduce a size t type to our configuration file, right? So, but to be fair, maybe int is fine. I mean, int is probably fine, why not? It's a pretty good song. Flute of the Traveler. Sounds pretty good. I really like that. No matching function, call foreground. Are you sure? Strange. Did I do a fucky wacky and maybe even a oopsie doopsie? Probably. So let me see. So here's a scale, position, text, renderer. What do you want from me? So this is probably because this kind of stuff turned out to be integer. So row height, if I understand correctly, so this is the scale, has to be f. All right, hopefully. Yeah, automatic conversion between the types in... Oh yeah, so it's so useless, my god. I just forgot to pass a renderer by a pointer and it shows me completely busted fucking... it's just so useless, my god. It makes me so mad. Like, you make a small mistake and the error message of the compiler is absolutely useless. And this is a mistake that could be easily caught by the compiler and actually generated a useful error message. But no, it has to be like that. I don't understand it. Okay, so let's take a look at how the text is rendered. It's not rendered correctly at all, which is really interesting. Oh, huh. I wonder why it stops in here. Is that because we ran out of triangles or something? Wait, that's pretty strange. Is that because of our renderer? So our renderer maybe, yeah, our renderer doesn't have enough triangles for us to render, or something like that. All right, so let me see. I can try to go to the game and just reduce the amount of rows, right? So that's one of the things we can do. Reduce the amount of rows. I don't know how that happened, but that happened somehow. I need to restart the game one more time. Come on, you can do that. I believe in you. Okay, so I'm gonna enable this thing and go to the vars config. Let's say that we're gonna have 35, like literally half of this stuff. Maybe even 20. Right, okay. So, and let's say that the size is gonna be twice as big. Right, so now we can see something. It is really, really strange. Well, yeah, you can clearly see that one of the triangles is sort of like cut off. It in fact like cut off, and maybe this has something to do with the renderer. I don't know, probably. Well, yeah, at least it does look like a console. Oh, and it actually doesn't show. Yeah, some of the buffers actually overflew. Yeah, so some of the buffers. I wonder how can we make it so if you want to render a lot of triangles, you don't overflow like buffers and shit like that. So for now we can probably increase the buffers, but in the future the question is how we're going to be doing all of that. So if I'm rendering the text, right? If I'm rendering the text, what I'm doing, I'm just filling up AABB. Right, simply filling up AABB and maybe in the renderer. So what's the size of the buffers? Really? Is that how many vertices I can have? That's actually a very small amount of vertices. So yeah, I'm gonna actually make it like way bigger, no, 4 times as big. Should be enough for everyone. And it didn't help? Excuse me? Really? You still don't have enough of this thing? Did I forget to recompile this entire thing? No, I didn't forget to recompile this entire thing. Okay. 124. If I multiply it by like 16 kilobytes, so what if I make it so super big? So what's up with that? What's up with that? No, it is literally not enough. So there's also batches. So this is the capacity of the batches. This is the shader assets. Oh, it could be something inside of the okay, it could be something inside of triangle VIO. Yeah. Triangle VIO. Yep. So also multiply it by this. So that should be enough now. To be fair, I'm not sure how to, you know, make it more robust, but now everything's okay, as you can see. Everything's okay, which is nice. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And here is the console that we're trying to render. And everything seems to be okay. So, and all of that stuff also seems to be okay. So maybe we should have some sort of like a padding between like text and console. But to be fair, I'm not sure if it's really needed. If you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So let me see. So maybe the text should be a little bit bigger. What about like 4 times as big? Is it too big? I think it's good. I think it's a good text in here. What do you guys think? Is that a good text? Good text. All right. So maybe now we need to introduce the buffer into which we're actually storing all of the characters and stuff like that. Yeah, I guess that's what we're gonna do. Let's introduce some sort of a buffer. So here's the console, and in here we're gonna have console. I don't know, buffer, I suppose. And in here, I would say we need something like console buffer rows, how many rows you can store, right? So, because when you look at the console, right, you only see a small window of that buffer, right? You don't see the whole buffer. So this is essentially like visibility buffer, but the actual amount of memory is going to be completely different, right? So how many rows we store at all. We can say that maybe the amount of rows we store in here is going to be 1024. Why not? So that's how many rows we're going to store. And what's going to be in each individual size of that row? I don't know, it doesn't really have to be very big, because I don't think it's going to be, the lines are going to be very long, right? You don't really need very long lines. So let's say we're going to have something like size console buffer columns, right? And it's going to be, I don't know, 256 or something, yeah, 256, and console buffer calls. Right. Interestingly enough, we also need to keep track of the current scroll, basically what is currently visible to the user. And I suppose this one is interesting, because what we need to do in here is essentially we need to have the ring buffer, right? So console is going to be a ring buffer, because if you append the lines in them, if you append lines in the console, they have to override the older ones, right? So it's essentially going to be a ring buffer. And since it's going to be a ring buffer, maybe it makes sense to actually extract console to a separate sort of structure, to a separate entity, because if we're going to be like putting all of that in here, it's not going to be particularly convenient. So yeah, maybe this is something that we have to do. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Something console, right? Something console HPP, right? So, and we're gonna define this entire thing, and it's gonna be end if, like so. And this is gonna be structure console, hold up. And we're gonna move all of these things in there, right? So this is gonna be that. And the buffer is gonna be located somewhere in here. So I suppose we need to do something like console enabled, right? So console enabled, and maybe also editor enabled. Editor enabled. Right. Because the console itself is going to be this structure that stores the buffer for the character, right? For the characters. So let's try to build this entire thing and see what kind of errors we need to fix in here. See what kind of errors we need to fix in here. So I probably also need to add this thing to the final build. Right, I need to add it to the final build, and let's try to rebuild this entire stuff. Okay, console. Really? Oh, this is because I didn't create the HPP file. So there's no really HPP file in here. I guess we can just introduce something like update, which is going to accept the state of the game, right? And delta time, but I'm not sure if you need delta time for the console itself, right? So maybe we're not going to pass it right now. We're going to pass it a little bit later. So something console CPP, right? And we'll have to include something console HPP, right? So this one, I suppose, is not going to do anything much. Console update. But in the future, maybe it's going to do something. It can try to render itself, I suppose, but I mean, it could be rendered by something else. So one of the important things in here, I think, are going to be push line, right? Push line, where you can provide the line. Maybe the line is going to be actually string view, right? And that's it for now. I don't see anything else. Yeah, and because of that, maybe we don't even need this thing anymore. So yeah, the most important one is going to be push line. Right. So console begin and see console count. So essentially, these are two variables that we're going to use to organize the ring buffer. Because as I already mentioned, the console is going to be a ring buffer. It is going to be a ring buffer, and if it overflows, it just reuses the old lines. It just reuses old lines. Sweet, sweet water. I kind of want to make another cup of tea. Alright, so it's going to be console CPP. Let's put this thing in here. Console, push line, and this entire thing is not implemented yet, so I think I'm going to put something like to do. Func, right, so essentially if I ever reach the execution of this function, it will crash and tell me that this thing is not implemented yet. Alright, so let's try to compile this entire stuff and see if we need to fix anything. Console, okay, let's include the HPP file. Something console HPP, there we go. Alright, so console buffer rows, invalid non-static. This entire thing has to be static somehow, but I don't remember. Is that what it wants from me? I think that's what it wants from me. Okay, so console enabled, right? That's what it's called, enabled. Next one, next compilation error, please. Editor enabled, right? What's the next one? Okay. Editor enabled. If editor enabled, we're rendering the editor UI. If the console enabled, we're rendering the console. If any of these things are enabled, we're rendering the cursor, right? The pizza cursor. Alright, seems to be working, so this entire thing finally compiles. Cool. And yep. So we have all of that. Now, let's try to implement push line. Right. Let's try to implement push line. So essentially how the ring buffer works. We have a fixed array, right? We have a fixed array. And we have a pointer that points at the beginning of the buffer. So this is begin. And we also have a size, right? And what size does, it basically, if you add size to the begin, it will point at the element after the last one. So is it called size or is it called count? I think I called it count. Okay, so this one is called count. Right, so, and that means this kind of pair of counters like denote these 4 elements. Right, if you want to add a new element to the buffer, right, you add it to the place where the count points, and you shift the count to the right, like this. I wish I could actually somehow... I think I should be able to if I have layers, but I don't see the layers thingy in here. I think this is what I have to do. Right, yeah. So, and I can put this thing in a separate layer, I suppose. Right, so... So I can do something like that, and in that specific separate layer, I can do something like count. Right, count, and then I can just drag it around. Yeah, this is perfect actually. All right, so, and as you add, I wish it didn't actually take that much time to switch between the layers. I have no idea why it just waits so much time. It is really, really inconvenient. But maybe it should be, it could be customizable, but I have no time or desire to actually customize anything here. So, right, so you add another element in here, right? So, and is it even possible to switch to this thing? Yeah, probably have to actually click it. And then you offset it like that, right? You keep offsetting it until you reach the end, right? Until you reach the end. And then, as you reach the end, you actually overflow the entire thing, and you start overriding the begin, but on top of overriding begin, you also offset the begin, and that way you sort of like go around the circular buffer, erasing the old elements. So that's what we need to implement in here. I wish my paint was a little bit more useful for this kind of explanation, but it's a piece of shit. So maybe I should switch to Krita, but Krita is too fucking slow. I don't even know. Maybe I should create my own drawing program. I don't know. Software is so bad in 2021. You literally have to create your own software if you want a good software. So we have two options. You either eat shit or create your own software. So I don't know. And since everything is open source, you can't even pay to anyone to make you good software. Alright, so, and does anyone even remember how to make fast and reliable software? Nobody fucking remembers that. So, anyway. So how are we pushing the line? Alright, so first we need to identify where we're going to be storing that line, right? So where are we going to be storing all of that? If console begin, I suppose we need to first check if console count is less than the rows, right? If it's less than rows, that means we can just append this entire thing at the end, right? So we have to do console begin plus console count, right? But we also have to mod it with console buffer rows, right? Because it can overflow. And that gives us the index at which we have to, you know, work with this entire stuff. Right, so this is going to be something like const. There we go, we have an index. So we've got an index. And this is where we have to take the console buffer and index. I might as well actually not call it index, but rather a row, right? So this is a row. And what I need to do here, I need to copy the line into the row. But here's the problem. Do we know the size of each individual row in here? I don't think so. I think we need to store somewhere that stuff somewhere. Maybe we can introduce something like console, like a row, right? And this one is going to be size t count, how many of the things you have in there, and essentially the characters, right? So chars, right? And this one is going to be console buffer calls. And here you have a buffer, right? So here is the buffer, and Okay, that's very interesting. Maybe I could call it rows. Your console rows, and here's a single row, and a single row has a count how much stuff you have in that buffer, right? And the characters themselves. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. Right, I think it's rather convenient. And maybe because of that, we can make a method in here, set. So I want to have a function that accepts the string view, right? It accepts the string view, and basically, you know, copies. Okay, we can do something like copy from SV. Yeah, copy from SV. And there we go. Yeah. So we provide SV, and you copy that thing in there. All right. So and copy from SV. Right, there you go. And after that, we're going to be simply incrementing the count, right? So I'm just incrementing the count. All right, so that's pretty good. So let's quickly implement this thing. Console row copy from SV. So it's going to be to do func. There we go. All right. So I'm thinking maybe I want to actually move this entire thing like somewhere here. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see. Otherwise, if the count is saturated, right? If the count is completely saturated, what we have to do, essentially, we have to basically override. Yeah. So this entire part is going to be common between both of the parts in here, right? So you identify the row and you override the current row with that. But if the amount of counts is not saturated, you just add one. If it is saturated, you just do something like begin +1, but you also basically wrap it around with console rows, right? With console rows. Yep. So that's basically the entire thing, as far as I can tell. Let me see if it compiles or not. So yeah, this one is that. It doesn't matter. Console rows. Maybe I still want to call it an index. So let me still call it an index. Okay, looks good to me. And that should be enough. All right, so here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to copy like a string view into a limited buffer. Row is a limited buffer. So that means if the size of the string view is bigger than the row, we have to cut it off, right? So we'll see how we can do that. So we're going to just use memcopy, a simple memcopy. The destination for the memcopy is going to be characters. The source of memcopy is going to be the data. And how much we're going to copy in there? Well, it's going to be a minimum between the count, right? Between the count and the capacity of the row, and the capacity of the row is basically the amount of columns, right? So the capacity of this entire thing. And then we need to set the count to the specific value, right? So, and maybe because of that, we want to actually do that first and then use the count to copy this thing. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're doing in here. So, and basically we implemented the whole ring buffer, right? That's the ring buffer. Nothing much to say. All right. Okay, everything seems to be compiling, and now when I'm rendering the entire stuff, right, what essentially I want to do, I want to iterate through the rows and just render the rows. Though we need to decide how we're going to be rendering, like, begin of the console. what does it determine? Does it determine the first value? It probably determines like, yeah, it probably determines the older values. Yeah, it determines the older values. Yeah, I remember from the previous implementation it was like some sort of a problem. Yeah. Alrighty. So maybe I'm gonna make a small break because I want to make a cup of tea. Alright, so let's quickly do that. Alright, let's continue. So let me see. What I want you to do now, instead of iterating through like all of the rows in here, I want you to iterate through through the existing rows. So something is definitely wrong with the order of rows and stuff like that, right? So because if we consider each individual row to be like a cell in here, right? So here we have a begin, so this is the begin, and somewhere there we have an end. Hello, Deep Singularity, hello. So here's the end. Interesting enough, I'm pushing everything in here, right? That means the bottom element is going to be here. The bottom element is going to be here. Which means that I have to start iterating things from begin plus count, count mod, actually -1, right, mod the rows, right, mod the rows, which is not particularly convenient. I would like to be able to iterate from begin, maybe even from 0 up until count -1, and basically add I to the begin to like determine where all of that is located. Which means that I suppose we need to change the way we store the lines in here. Right, so I suppose maybe the begin is always gonna point at the last one. But I also want to be able to iterate them through, like from left to right, if you know what I mean. So, this is kind of interesting. So, essentially, if I have a begin, right? So begin and some sort of a count. If I want to push a new element, I'm actually pushing it like this in here, which is really interesting. Incrementing the count but pushing it into the begin. That's very, very, very interesting. Is it gonna be okay for me to do that? I think so. So that means it's gonna constantly wrap around from the left side, right? It's constantly wrapping around from the left side. So that means I need to go to the console and change the way it works. I need to change the way it works. It's going to be console.hpp. Right, so here is the begin. Well, yeah. So the first thing I need to do, I need to decrement begin. This one is slightly different. Okay, let's just comment it out and think what we can do in here. Okay, so we yet again have this situation when console count is either less than count buffer rows or it is bigger than the count buffer rows, right? If it's less, it should be as simple as decrementing begin, but it may underflow, right? So essentially if console begin is greater than 0, right? If greater than 0, you can basically decrement it by 1, right? You can decrement it by 1, or you can essentially wrap it around. It's going to be console rows -1. It would be way easier if I could, instead of this stuff, I could do something like console begin -1, mod console begin rows, and just reassign it back to what it was. But first of all, console begin is unsigned integer, right? So it already doesn't work like that. Right? So I probably have to change it to a proper integer. One of the things I can probably do, I can statically cast it to an integer, right? So, and then do something like this. And second of all, mod in C++ doesn't work as mathematical mode. It works more like a remainder. But as far as I know, in 8, I do have a mathematically correct mod. Yeah, there we go. So I do have it. So I might as well use something like this. Right, so we can do mod and put it like this. But this entire thing now is an integer. Not really, this value is size t as well, so yeah, I have to be a little bit more careful. So I'm casting this thing to size to integers, then I have to cast this to an integer, right? And after I'm done with my modding, I need to cast it back to size t, right? So static cast size t, right? Just to be able to do this kind of stuff, right? And not, you know, doing any branching here at all. So is that a good code? Is that a readable code? Probably. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. Alright, so let me see. So now we know the place where we can put the line, right? So I can do console rows, console begin, right? Console begin, and I'm basically copying the line from the string view. So, and after that I can increment the count +1. +1. Alright, so this is the case when count is not saturated, right? It is not saturated. If it is saturated, I guess it's the same shit, I suppose. I think it is the same shit. I still need to decrement begin, but the only difference here, I think, is going to be... Yeah, I think the only difference here is going to be that I don't increment the count. Yeah, it's actually way simpler than I thought. Alright, so that means I can take this entire stuff, just put it in here, right, and then if the count less than this entire thing, we keep incrementing the count. Alright, so that's actually pretty good. So that way, we're actually pushing the line at the beginning. Right, we're pushing the line at the beginning, and then it just overflows and keeps overriding itself. And this is quite important because that allows me to iterate from 0 up until console count, right, up until console count, something like this, and just basically render the rows begin plus I, and they're going to be rendered in the correct order. That's quite important. So that's precisely why I'm doing all of that stuff in here. So stat, okay, there we go. Alright, hopefully I didn't make any fucky-wacky and possibly any oopsie-doopsie. Yep. Okay, let's try to compile this entire thing. now I'm gonna go to the game, right, and where am I rendering the foreground? Okay, so what I want to render in here is essentially started from 0 console rows, and actually a minimum between console rows and how many rows we have in an actual console. To be fair, I didn't think it makes sense to prefix the fields of a structure with the structure name. Don't you guys think that it's kind of stupid? So we have a structure console, and inside of that structure you prefix its fields with console, right? I think it's kind of dumb, so let's actually not do that, right? So, yeah, you already have that prefix in the form of a structure, right? So there's no need to prefix it like that. But even in C, it doesn't make much sense to actually prefix it like that, right? Even in C, because in C you would end up having like console, right? And then you can do console begin. Like, it's still, there's no reason to do that, even in C. So I don't know why. So this is the begin, and this entire thing is also within the namespace of the structure, right? So I can also get rid of that. Right, so this is buffer rows. Okay, let's go through the compilation errors. It's pretty good song. Okay. So in the main game, I want to iterate, I suppose, console buffer rows minimum between, yeah, actually console rows, and the console count, right? The console count. Funny how, despite that fact, most structs in libc have fields prefixed with the abbreviation of the struct name. Why would they do that, actually? What's the point? It probably makes sense for such things as align off, where you refer to the field of the structure outside of the structure itself. So it's C++11, but it's actually also available in the latest C. Right, so essentially you can say no, offset of, I'm sorry, it's not a line of, offset of. There's so many Russian names in the C, like size of, a line of. Anyway, offset of, yeah, so here you have a type and a member. So many Russians worked on C compiler, so they decided to call they decided to call the separators after their names. All right. So, but even in that case, you see, so you're using field of the structure outside of the structure. Vector align of key comrade. All right. So it's gonna be console, and this one, is it gonna be like size T? I think it's gonna be size T. So this is a row position. And what I want to render in here, in fact, yeah, I have an idea. I think row should have a method as sv. There we go. Right. So basically you can copy thing from sv into the row, and you can refer to the row as sv, because look, it's basically like a, yeah, so you already have a count and you already have a pointer to this entire thing. So console cpp. It's gonna be let's move it in here. So it's gonna be console row. There we go. So, and essentially what we're gonna return in here, I suppose, is string view. Yeah, so that's what we want to do in here. So those words are of the structure of the Russian thought. You didn't understand the joke. So do you know how Russian surnames look like? Russian surnames. The thing about Russian surnames is that they all end with ov. That's the thing about Russian surnames. So, and you have operators such as size of, align of, offset of. Come on. It's not that hard. That's the joke. That was the entire joke. Is Ivan really a name? Yes. I never met a person named Ivan except stories. Well, have you heard about Provod? So, if you never heard about Provod, I actually recommend to follow him. Yeah, so, interesting thing is that he streams in Russian, but if you ask him anything in English, he would answer in English. His name is Ivan, as far as I know, is it not? I think. Is it not? I'm pretty sure. His name is Ivan. He's actually... Okay, he actually hid that information. Okay, I followed to say I'm... okay, nice. Damn, I feel bad actually. I hope I didn't actually fuck it up, but yeah. I mean, we are on the internet, okay? Who refers to each other on the internet by their real names? Am I right? So... I bet you don't even know my real name, so... anyway, so... let's continue. Oh, his GitHub page, okay. So... oh, he's Ivan, yeah. There we go. So... you can actually follow him on Twitch. Wait until he streams, and ask him, are you really Ivan? Go ahead and ask him, and he will tell you, yes, my comrade, I am Ivan. So, yeah, so anyway. So cold. I'm sorry, bro. It's a joke. It's all. Any Ivans? Yes. Count data chars. There we go. Okay, go. Comparison of the integer, blah blah blah. Console rows. Shit, fuck, damn, god damn. I'm only a pleb front-end guy, but I'll hang around. Don't worry about that. I develop front-end as well quite often. One of the things I created, by the way, is Emojam. Have you heard about this application before? I really recommend to check it out. Right, so essentially you can upload any static image in there. Right, so I don't know if you can, yeah, debate it. Right, and apply some sort of filter, right? I don't know, rain, right, and render it into a GIF. And the interesting thing about this stuff, it's completely front-end. So it doesn't even have any backend, and it does all of the rendering on your machine. So this thing is as front-end as you can get. This entire thing is a front-end. And it's completely open source. You can check out the source code in here. It's written in Typescript. Yep. So yeah, I'm also front-end pleb. What do you want? So everyone is front-end pleb in 2021. You need to make money somehow. So I think this is how we have to do that. Am I front? Yes. And you too. Everyone is front-end pleb. Static console. Okay, so this is not what I wanted. It's static cast. I want to cast this shite to an integer. Alrighty, so and as I render this entire thing, alright, what I need to do in here is console rows, console begin plus I, but also mod console buffer rows, right? Console buffer rows, and as we got this thing, I'm going to do as SV. There we go. All right, so this stuff should now render the console, the buffer of the console. I guess I gotta get drunk now and do a JavaScript stream. Give Typescript a try. It's actually way more pleasant than JavaScript. Seriously. If you ever have to do any work with JavaScript, try Typescript. It actually will make it less painful. Consider Typescript some sort of like a lube for JavaScript. Makes it go smoother, right? Sodium flushed, exactly. It requires, yeah, unfortunately. Okay, technically it doesn't require npm. Okay, I'm gonna try to show you how to do TypeScript without npm. All right, so I'm gonna quickly switch the title. TypeScript without. I also need to save the previous title because I don't remember. Okay, TypeScript without npm. All right, so I'm gonna show you a trick. Prop make do TypeScript without npm. Right, go to Microsoft TypeScript. I think that's where it's located. They must have shit in their releases. Yes, here it is. So they do have that shit in there. So now I can try to download this thing. TypeScript without npm wget. There we go. Microsloth, yes. So they have a tarball, and if I unpack that tarball, fvx TypeScript. So it has a name package for whatever fucking reason. I'm gonna remove it. I'm gonna rename it to TypeScript, right? TypeScript, right? And let's remove this. Maybe not. So if we take a look inside of this entire thing, right? So you have a bin, but I mean, here's the thing: you still need Node.js, right? So an npm is basically part of the Node.js. But in any case, you can run now the compiler that comes here. It's TSC, right? So here's TSC, and here's your compiler. So you can initialize the config, right? And here is your config, essentially. All right, and here you can place some TypeScript code, right? Something like console log hello world, right? Hello world. And then you can go and call TypeScript yet again, and it will compile it to JavaScript. So as far as I know, what it does, it finds all of the TS files in the current folder and compiles them into the JavaScript. Right, there we go. That's it. That's pretty much it. I didn't use any npm, by the way. Didn't use any npm. You can literally download TypeScript from here. So yeah, but you still need Node because it's completely written in JavaScript as well. So, and for anyone who's interested, I'm gonna put this thing in the description. Where to download TypeScript without npm, right? So it's a secret place. Microsoft doesn't want you to know about that place, right? But you can download the releases of TypeScript from there. Don't tell Microsoft, okay? So all right, I'm gonna continue. Is it really that slow? Not really. I think it's like warming up my caches and whatnot. Okay, it is that slow. So I think it might be having something to do with that it goes inside of this folder as well. If I move TypeScript outside, right, and then I do something like TypeScript bin tsc. Yeah, it is that slow. All right, let's continue. It will recurse. Not everybody knows that, but you can actually traverse file tree without recursion. It's a secret technique, not everybody knows about it, but it is possible to traverse trees, file trees, and any kind of trees without using any recursion. And it's not going to be recursive at all, so it's not using recursion. It is in fact possible, and I've done it multiple times. I even implemented quick sort without recursion. As a matter of fact, you don't need recursion at all. You just don't need it. You can implement a recursive algorithm without recursion. Okay, so let me see. So this should work now. So if I try to render this entire stuff, right? You can nearly always, you can always replace recursion with iteration, like always. The only reason, like the only actual reason people use recursion is because they want to exploit the call stack. Here's the interesting thing. You can work with the stack explicitly. You can, and you can get the same effect. All right. So, okay, so here's the console, but it doesn't have anything in there yet. Right, it doesn't have anything in there yet. So one of the things we can do is, I suppose when we press enter, we can insert some stuff into the console, right? So this is what we can do, at least try. Right, so it's gonna be a handle event. So I suppose it's kind of something like SDLK return? I think it's a return. If it's not return, I don't know what is it gonna be. So let me quickly compile this entire thing. This is not how I compile this stuff. Okay, it was a return in fact. So I'm taking my console and I push line, right? I push the line in here. And what exactly do I want to push in there? I actually want to push different things every time. And you know, I have a pretty good candidate for this kind of stuff. So I have a library called Gym, I think. Yeah, so here it is. It's basically like an immediate mode JSON serializer. If you're interested in this thing, I can put it in the chat and also in the description. So somewhere like a immediate mode JSON serializer, right? And in the examples, for testing purposes, I have a file called fruits. Guess what's in there? This is just a list of fruits. What did you expect? Like, this is literally a list of fruits. Like, it's a single file, it's a list of fruits. I'm not even joking, this is literally it. And I'm gonna download it and I'm gonna use it in my game for testing purposes. So, there we go. If you want to use it as well, I'm gonna put it in the description. So, yeah. List of fruits. There we go. It's actually pretty good. I think I stole it from the internet somewhere. I don't remember from where I stole it. If you find it, please remind me to credit the person from whom I actually stole that. Right, or maybe make a pull request or something. So wget. So fruits. It's actually pretty cool. You look at the code and you have two files that stand out. First one, aids.hpp, and the second one is fruits. Okay, so for those who doesn't know, aids is my replacement for std. You can find it in here. My replacement for std. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Oh shit, this is not how we download fruits. So we have to go to the raw version of fruits. What do we get? So here's the fruits and soapsor. Wait a second. Isn't that the creator of C++? The creator of C++ is a fruit. I didn't know that. My god. Boysenberry. The fuck? Okay. Where are we gonna include this entire shit? It's actually kind of interesting. Because this kind of thing... you know what? We're gonna include it in the global thingy, right? Above everything. Something release. I suppose it makes sense to not include it in the release, right? So if it's not a release, we're gonna include the fruits, right? Right. There we go. So if it's a release, don't include the fruits. Okay, so what do we have in here? And fruits, random fruits count, right? And I think I also need to convert this entire thing somewhere in here. From sister as string view. Yeah, this is what I wanted. Sister as string view, and that's what I'm pushing in here. All right. So every time I press enter, it is going to push a fruit. Sister, yes, sister. Have you heard about sisters? It's a null-terminated strings. C-strings. Sisters. All right, so what do we got? Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty cool. Look at them go. Look at those fruits. Fruits and nuts. Fruits and nuts and fruits and nuts. Yep. Pretty cool. So, what else? I actually wanted to reduce the size of the buffer just to see how it actually overflows and shit. Overflows and shit. So the size is gonna be like literally 5. Right, so we have 5 rows now. So it's gonna be something debug, and works fine. So we have a ring buffer. So I limit it to a size of 5, and it works perfectly fine. Overflow of stack. Yeah, I really like this list of fruits because it's really useful for debugging purposes. Like you want just generate some text, right? And you can just do that. Why not? Interestingly enough, I think I want to have longer lines, right? And probably because of that, I want to. Oh boy, I don't know. I want to be able to append things to the row rather than completely reset the thing. Right, is there any easy way for me to append the shit? But to be fair, so there's a push line, right? I can push a new line, but maybe there should be something to append to the new line? I don't know. Lorem ipsum. Maybe I should use lorem as well. Also, I can try to limit the size of the columns to 5. Now we have a terminal with the buffer 5 by 5. Why not? And it should work fine. So the thing should just cut off, essentially. Yeah, so it's 5 by 5 now. Almost between 10, yeah. We can actually do something interesting, like in vars. We can say that the rows is going to be 5. Right, now we have precisely 5 rows, but that enables us with making the font bigger. Right, we can make it like 20, I think. Yeah. And now, look at them go. It's better than Windows Terminal. Yeah. Where can I actually get my PhD now? I mean, this one doesn't support clear type, but I mean, so let's actually go back. It's gonna be 20. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I'm really happy with this terminal. Maybe we should do a little bit of a committee, and maybe even a pusher. So the amount of rows is going to be 1000, amount of columns is going to be 256. All right. So, and let's just rebuild. Something debug. Cool. So I'm gonna have it as a separate commit. Yes. So, yeah. Fruits. Literally a single word. Fruits. And I'm gonna push it right into the repo. How does your conf file work for runtime variables manipulation? Seems like a great debugging tool. So essentially, let me show you. I think I need to make a video about that, like because it's really video worthy. So let me show you. So we have a configuration file, right, that looks like this. So I have a special tool called config indicer, which grabs this file and generates the C code for this specific file. I mean, we can tell people to look at the code, but it's kind of like, it's really sophisticated, so it's really difficult to understand how exactly it works. So I should make some sort of like a walkthrough video where I can just point people at that video and they'll get the idea how this entire thing works. So basically from this thing, we generate this code, right? For each individual variable, we generate a definition which associates the name with its type, right? And then it generates an array, basically where each individual cell, an element of that array, is the variable. And then for each variable, we generate a macro that redirects to that cell, converting to the corresponding type. You see, you can convert to float, to color, to integer, and so on and so forth. And each individual cell in here is a union. So essentially, we have a helper code that basically uses this definition, reads that config file again, and populates this array yet again, updating all of the values at runtime. But we also have a release build. And in release build, it actually gets very, very interesting. So I can do build release. All right. So, and in release build, the actual index, as far as I can tell, looks like this. Look at that. Instead of this runtime array, those things became compile time values. So the same things that you can reload at runtime in debug mode becomes compile time values and enable the compiler to actually fold the constants and perform a lot of different optimizations. So yeah. And we have a special tool that can, you know, basically generate this kind of stuff in debug and release mode. So that's basically how it works. Does it make sense? Okay, moving on. I guess nobody gives a shit. So, I need to actually make myself a note to make a video about that, I suppose. About conf hot reload. Okay, so what do we have in here? Increase the size of the renderer buffers, right? Yep. So what we did in here, we introduced the console. Implement the console ring buffer. So also here's the thing, our project does not build in release mode for some reason, so we'll probably need to fix that first. Yep. This one is interesting. Yeah. So if not defined something release, we're not including that stuff. And if something is, there we go. Okay, release build actually takes a little bit of time because it enables all of the optimizations and stuff like that. Okay, seems to be working. And of course, in the release build, you can't reload anything, but it should work faster, I think. I think it should work faster. Okay. Fix release build. Takes about 45 minutes to compile the game I'm working on at work. I would be proud of that. Okay. So, what's going to be the next thing? The next thing we want to do, we want to be able to actually edit, basically enter the commands, right? So, and to be able to enter the commands, we need some sort of a buffer into which we can enter them. And as we press enter, they have to be sent into the console. So let me see. So I'm just thinking where we're gonna provide that buffer. I think I'm gonna just create it in here. So this is more of a like a ring buffer. Right. This is more of a ring buffer. But here we're gonna have an edit field. So it's gonna be character. To be fair, one of those rows could be a pretty good candidate for edit field, if you know what I'm talking about. One of those rows. That would be kind of cool. Maybe it would make sense to like sort of extract this entire stuff. Right. But it doesn't keep track of the I think I need to make a small break. Right. So because I need to refill my tea and stuff like that, and then after the break we'll decide how we can approach this entire stuff. All right. Alright, so now we need to think how we're gonna organize all of that. I need to put the buffer for the editing somewhere, but the question is where I'm gonna be putting that buffer. To be fair, I don't want to call this thing a console, because that actually implies that everything related to console has to be put in there. So I would rather rename this to something like a row ring. Right, let's actually call something like a row ring. And because of that, I want to move the row somewhere in here. Right, so we have a row here. So, and because of that, maybe we can actually put capacity somewhere in there. All right. And interesting thing, do I want this thing to be customizable outside? Because I could probably make a template, but I mean, I don't know. So console const size t console calls, and it's gonna be 256. Console rather buffer calls, right? Console console buffer rows. So, and we want to remove all of that. So you have a row and row ring. This is a console buffer rows. This one is a console buffer cons. Right. So this is precisely why I don't eat in McDonald's, by the way. Okay. row ring. This one is a row. Okay, so let's actually do something like this. So let's rebuild everything. Okay, so what do we have in here? Yeah, a ring row. Console. It's called console ring. Right. So it's a ring row. All right. Is it? It's a row ring. I think it's called row ring. Console ring. Maybe there should be something in the console ring that lets us get the current row or something. By eye and whatnot. Console. So something like string view get, and you provide the index, right? So you provide the index, and that index is essentially going to be computed offset from the begin, right? So that's probably something that we want to have in here. So console is cpp, and there we go, a row ring like this. So it's going to be begin plus index plus count. Not really. Plus index and mod console buffer rows, right? And in here I'm taking the row and then convert it to SV, right? So that's basically what I want to have in here. That's why I'm extracting this to a separate method, because that's a lot of things to keep in mind. All right, and I can do something like console ring get I, all right, and I don't have to do that at all. Yep. So render that position, blah blah blah, looks good to me. Let's go through the compilation process. Console buffer calls. Yeah, love this. Hopefully the compiler will generate something efficient in here. I really hope so. Okay. So we separated this to think. All right. So now, what do we have? We have separate row, and we have a row ring. And now we can probably use this row for the editor, for the specific editor, right? For this specific editor, so let's put it somewhere into the game. So it's going to be game HPP, console ring, and then we have a row, console prompt, I suppose. Maybe it has to be called like prompt or something. Yeah. And because of that, probably we need to render a little bit more space for the prompt, right? Because in the configuration, we say that the height of the console is 20 rows, but in reality it has to be 21 to accommodate the prompt, right? So where you're going to be entering all of that stuff. So let's go ahead into the rendering part and just do something about that. Yeah, there we go. So the console height is the console rows plus 1 for the prompt, right? So, and now if I render this entire thing, I think it should kind of work, hopefully. Okay, so yeah, okay, so the prompt is here. We have to actually render the prompt down below. Probably because of that, what I have to do in here is I plus 1, so this is the position of the prompt. So yeah. And yeah, there we go. So as you can see, we have a little bit of space in here, specifically for the prompt. Yep. So let me also maybe adjust the size. So let's say that we're gonna have 10 of them, right? But their size is gonna be around like 10. So yeah, maybe 10 is too much. What about 8? Yeah, something like 8 should be fine. So I just want it to be big so it's visible, right? So seems good. Okay. So do we have in here? Split console into row, ring, and row. There we go. So in here we basically added some space for the prompt, but I think I'm not gonna commit that yet. Alright, so how are we gonna approach this entire thing? So this is a background, this is a foreground. Here we're rendering the log, right? So this is the log, essentially. And here we have a prompt. So, oh, this is actually a pretty good idea. So that means maybe that thing should be called log. Yeah, there we go. This is actually pretty cool. Console enabled. Ring of rows is console log. A single row is a console prompt. And yeah, namings here is actually quite good. So I'm gonna replace console ring with console log. There we go, so it's way better in my opinion. Right, so here we're rendering log, and here we're going to be rendering the prompt. And the place where we're rendering the prompt is basically const, something like this, 20, like that. Prompt position, right? So it has to be prompt position, and it's located at 0, so that means I have to just use the console position because all of that will be cancelled out essentially. All of that is cancelled out. This one is interesting. We'll need to introduce some way to handle keystrokes, and when the developer presses some keystrokes, we need to append them into the prompt essentially. But I'm not 100% sure how we're going to do that. I remember the SDL had special events for text editing, but I don't know. So I take the prompt, console prompt, and convert it to SV, and there we go. Then I use prompt position, and that should be fine. Right, that should compile. Okay, so now, when I press return, what in fact I want to do, instead of using fruits, right, I want to take console prompt, interpret it as SV, and then push it into the console log as yet another line. It's actually pretty cool. So the idea of separating these entities like a row and a ring of rows was actually pretty cool, right? So they actually fit together. So they have a synergy, if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, and the console, yeah, is just basically prompt, which is a row, and the log, which is a ring of rows. All right, I'm actually super proud of this design. It's actually way better design than in the previous version of this game, right? So this is a rewrite of the game, and in the previous version of this game, the console was actually crappier than this. This one is actually better. It's simpler, it's better. I like that. So I think that means I'm learning something. All right. So, and after that, maybe we want to actually clean the prompt. Right now, the easiest way to clean the prompt is essentially just set the count to 0, right? So, but maybe for, you know, for self-descriptive purposes, we want to actually introduce the method clear, right? So, yeah, that probably makes sense. So, and this one is going to be something like clear, and I'm going to go to the console CPP. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. All right, so it's going to be roll, and count is going to be 0. That's right. So let's try to do that. Yes. Come on, this. Interestingly, yeah, so the handling keystrokes imposes some sort of a challenge. Imposes some sort of a challenge because we also use keys for controlling stuff and keys for, yeah, this one is really interesting. So here's the mouse position, here's some UI stuff. I'll need to think about that one. So, but for now we can introduce something to test things out. Just to test things out. So I'm gonna go to the console, copy from SV, and I want to do append SV, append from SV. Right, it's gonna be string view SV. Right. Console CPP. Row. There we go. So essentially, I need to do yet another mem copy. All right, I need to do yet another mem copy. From actually, the destination is going to be characters plus count. The source is going to be date, and the amount of things is rather interesting. The amount of things you want to copy. So if you try to copy something like count, right, you would have to then add count to SV count, right, something like this. But what if you overflow, right? What if you overflow? I suppose you need to check that if count plus SV is greater than console buffer columns, or greater, actually it could be equal, right? So if it is greater, that means the actual amount that you want to copy has to be slightly different. So let's introduce something like size t, like actual count to copy. So initially it's going to be something like this, right? So actual count to copy, and if count, let's call it count to copy, right? SV count, right? Wait a second, we have a copy of the string view. That means I can update SV count directly. So if SV count plus this thing is greater than that, that means SV count has to be console buffer calls minus count, right? Essentially, right? And that's basically it. Yeah. That's fine, because by modifying this thing, we're not ruining anything, right? So we're just modifying the local copy of this string view. All right, and that way we can ensure that it's going to be fine. If this thing is going to be bigger, that means the count is going to be 0 and you don't copy anything. So yeah, so we keep appending this entire stuff. Right, so let's rebuild this entire thing. And now in a game, when we handle the events, when I press some keys, what kind of keys do I want to press there to test things out? Let's actually set something like X, right? Case SDL key X, right? And what we're going to be appending in there, we're going to do console. Oh, this one is interesting. Oh yeah, it's not console prompt append from SV, and essentially we're going to be using fruits, right? So fruits count minus, actually it has to be random divided by fruits counts, and then SV sister from as string view. That's precisely what I want to have here. So after that I can append maybe some space just in case, right? So every time I press X, it's going to append a fruit into the prompt, and then if I press enter, that fruit is going to be actually submitted into the log, right? So that's basically what we're doing in here. That is basically what we're doing in here, and let me see if it works. Right, okay, so I press X and it appends fruits, and then I press enter, now it's in the log. Yeah. So I can have empty things in here. So that's pretty cool. So it's almost working console. It's actually almost working console. That's pretty nice. I really like that. But the problem is that, right, so I have a control over the player, right? So I have a control over the player, and when we are in the console mode, I should not allow controlling the player, as essentially when I'm in the editor mode, I should not allow to player to shoot, right? So since I'm, you know, in the world editor mode, I need the mouse to do things. But if I quit the editor mode, I can shoot again. So that's totally fine, but yeah. So yeah, we'll see how we can organize all of that. So what did we do in here? We essentially introduced the console prompt. Right. Introduce console prompt, and let's push that right into the repo. I wonder if I can quickly hack it so so it works as you would expect it. So let me see. So here's the game input, editor input. Yeah, okay. So I think we want to separate. We want to separate console input as well. Yeah. Oh boy, this one is interesting. This one is really interesting. Custom mouse button and so on and so forth. All right, so I think I'm gonna actually make a separate to do for that and think about that separately. Right, so to do console prompt. How to say that? Does not handle the user input properly. So we're gonna make it a separate to do. Alright, so I'm gonna remove this thing and it's gonna be to do. I'm gonna push that right into the repo. And let's create a pull request for the development console. Initial I don't know, draft of the development console. That's basically what it is. And let's actually snitch up all of these things. It's going to be report prepend body introduced in 114. Right. So okay. So I apparently have something that I forgot to snitch up. Color should be probably. No, I'm not gonna actually report that because it's three-dimensional vectors. Maybe this one is important. Yeah, this is the one that we introduced. And let's push everything right into the repo. Okay, go. And yeah, I guess we managed to implement some approximation to the development console. The only thing we need in here is, you know, proper handling of the, you know, of the keystrokes and stuff like that. That does not overlap with the game control, because right now I can control the game, but when I'm in the console mode, I shouldn't be able to control the game. But we're gonna implement that next time. Thanks everyone who's watching me right now. I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and I see you next time, maybe on Twitch, maybe on YouTube. Follow my YouTube channel where I actually post all of the VODs from Twitch. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Hope this was interesting. See you all next time. Love you.